The projector hummed like a wasp trapped in a jar. Cold air spilled from the ceiling vent onto the back of my neck, the kind of recycled chill that smelled faintly of burnt dust and bad coffee. 40 officers filled the tiered seats of the Norfolk briefing room, bars, birds, and quiet egos, waiting for the Admiral to begin. "Before we start, what's your call sign, Princess?" he said. Paper flicked. Knuckles rapped on armrests. Laughter rippled. Light at first, then brighter, the way fluorescent bulbs buzz when they're about to burn out. I kept my palms resting on my flight helmet on the table. Black shell, scratches like constellations, my Reaper insignia hidden beneath a strip of tape. I looked at Admiral Nathan Cole. His face wore that relaxed coastal tan you get when power rides shotgun. His lip tilted. "Reaper 0, I said. The room canceled itself. The AC throbbed once and seemed to hold its breath. Someone's pen stopped mid-click. Captain Reeves inhaled a dry, audible H. The Admiral didn't blink. Color backed away from his skin like a tide. I tapped the helmet with 2 knuckles. The thunk sounded hollow and steady. Reeves started. "That was you?" I nodded once. No grin. No flourish. The projector kept humming, projecting a blank blue square on the wall like a held note. I watched recognition move through the room, a wave traveling spine to spine. The Helmand Ridge extraction had lived in whispers. A storm over Kandahar, a downed team, a ghost pilot who flew a line nobody should have flown. Most in this room had told the story like a campfire legend. None had pictured the ghost as me. Admiral Cole's throat worked, the tiny motion of a man who'd swallowed something sharp. He finally found a sentence and then lost it again. He closed his folder. The paper made a small, defeated sound. I kept my voice level. "We can proceed with the weather window, Admiral. Silence is a kind of salute when people realize they were looking in the wrong direction. It wasn't vengeance. It was air clearing after a storm, the sudden metallic smell of rain lifting. The first time I learned to breathe inside a room like that, I was 8. The kitchen clock ticked loud enough to be a metronome. My father, Chief Petty Officer Richard Reynolds, sat at the table with his forearms bare and a carburetor scattered like a puzzle on a towel. Gasoline's sweet bite mixed with dish soap and the lemon oil my mother used on the cabinets. He didn't look up when I held out the paper airplane I'd folded from his maintenance checklist. "It flies," I said. "It tears," he said. He pinched the wing and ripped it once, neatly. "Pilots are dreamers. Real sailors fix engines." The rip sounded like cloth surrendering. I rewrote the moment for years, swapping in better fathers, kinder words, but the sound remained. Later, when I finally held metal wings heavy in my hand, wings I paid for in sweat and wakefulness, I felt the seam where he'd torn me. I pressed the pin into my uniform and told the mirror, quietly, to watch. At family dinners, he'd praise my brother's mechanics scores, then glance at my flight manuals and say, "Paper wings won't save lives." He never meant it to be cruel, he meant it to be true. He loved torque values, tolerances you could measure. I loved the line between ground and sky you couldn't. My mother kept the peace with nods and casserole. She'd smoothed the tablecloth, a floral thing that smelled faintly of starch, and worn the conversation off cliffs. Her silence was its own kind of weather, present, predictable, and hard to navigate. I learned competence the way some kids learn instruments, with scales before songs. I stripped and reassembled my own helmet after a downwash of sand in Nevada jammed the comms. I labeled every cable and stowed my gloves in the same pocket, every time, so my hands never fumbled in the dark. When the helmet's chin pad cracked, I patched it with a strip of tape and re-engraved the worn Reaper wings on the inside lip with a heated needle. I liked the sting of the metal warming through the glove, the way the smell of singed plastic drifted up, faint and chemical, as the emblem deepened. Years later, the night the storm hit Kandahar, the ops tent smelled like sweat and canvas and the wet metal breath of incoming weather. Someone's radio squawked a distorted plea, half-eaten by static. "Team 6, Ridge, blacked out." A gust unhooked the flap and slapped it against the pole with a sound like a palm cracking a thigh. I pulled my helmet down until the padding kissed my temples, the familiar pressure like an oath. Lieutenant Alvarez, my co-pilot, glanced at me. His eyes were steady. A man's faith contained in two quiet pupils. I could taste grit on my teeth. Command called it impossible. The storm over Helmand marched like a wall. But maps are stories, and stories can be wrong. I traced a seam the wind hadn't sealed yet, a narrow corridor where the mountain shouldered the worst of it. We ride the rotor shadow under the shelf, I said. In and out, quick and mean. Zero? Alvarez asked. He didn't need to say more. Zero was our shorthand for the bone straight line where you either make it or you don't, the one you don't file, the one you don't brief. Zero, I said. We went. The aircraft shook like a dog flinging water. Rain hit the skin in sheets. The sound was 1,000 marbles rolling. The smell inside the cockpit turned metallic, wires warming under load. I could feel the cyclic like a pulse in my palm. When the ridge opened its mouth, Alvarez called out a bearing in a voice so calm it seemed borrowed. The team's strobe flashed once, a single blink like an eyelid trying to open. We pulled them out, 6 men and 1 broken radio. And the storm tried to seal behind us, but we slipped through the seam I'd bet on. Later, someone called the pilot a ghost. Someone else called her lucky. They all kept the name. Reaper Zero. I wore it like a bruise where a medal should be. Tender, private, real. I never asked for the story to be public. Classified work belongs to silence. But silence had a way of teaching me the same lesson from different directions. At a reunion dinner months later, over the burnt butter smell of steaks and the clink of a cheap restaurant's cutlery, my father looked at my uniform and said to a cousin, "Desk pilot." He smiled when he said it. The smile hurt more than the words. Chief Warrant Officer Miller, my mentor, found me on the hangar floor after a flight one night, the concrete still radiating heat through my boots. He handed me a bottle of water, still cold enough to sweat. "Respect isn't granted," he said. "It's taken when they realize they're small." His voice carried the rasp of a man who'd eaten sand and kept flying. I nodded and tucked the sentence into the same pocket as my gloves. When Admiral Cole arrived, charismatic, sharp, and allergic to humility, I recognized the species. He'd lean on the briefing table, drumming 2 fingers, and say, "You sure about those numbers?" Or, "Careful, princess, this isn't a simulator." 8 words or less, every time, as if length would cost him rank. I logged the lines and flew the plan anyway. The day of the Norfolk briefing, I'd already decided on the only plan that mattered. Fly flawlessly, mentor quietly, document everything, answer nothing I didn't have to. The helmet sat under my hand like a small, patient animal. Its scuffs mapped the hours I'd wrestled with weather and won. My call sign tag lay face down, the engraved wings hidden from the room and not from me. The Admiral's joke reached for a cheap laugh and grabbed a live wire instead. "Reaper Zero," I said. The word Reaper has a hard edge at the start and a blade at the end. It doesn't shout, it cuts. The room bled noise until none remained. The projector hummed. The AC shivered out another cold breath. Someone's chair creaked as they leaned forward and finally saw me. I didn't look at Cole again. I addressed the screen. "Weather window is 18 minutes. We'll need the corridor now, or not at all." When I lifted my helmet, the inside lip caught the light. For a fraction, the little engraved wings shone. I could feel the tacky residue of tape under my thumb, a reminder. Some truths you keep covered until the moment they need air. The Admiral cleared his throat. Once. Then the room found a new shape around my name. The next time he spoke to me, he didn't use a joke. He used my ghost. The hum of the projector still lived in my skull long after the briefing ended. Even in the quiet of my quarters, I could hear it. The same steady insect-like drone that used to come from my father's shop light. It was the sound of judgment disguised as order. I sat on the narrow bunk, helmet resting beside me. The Reaper insignia caught a dull gleam from the corridor light and threw it across the metal wall. For a second, the reflection looked like a pair of clipped wings. Then the light shifted, and they vanished. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air smelled faintly of fuel and disinfectant. Sterile, military calm. I closed my eyes, but the room bent backward into memory. Salt wind, kitchen clock, the sound of a carburetor clicking against the table. I was 10 again, elbows raw from sanding a model plane smooth enough to mirror the sun. "Engines don't care about beauty," my father said without looking up. "They care about balance." He ran his thumb over the propeller I'd carved, found the smallest imperfection, and snapped it clean in half. The crack was sharp, like a ruler against a desk. "You'll thank me," he added. "Better to learn now before the sky does it for you." I remember the smell of oil thick in my throat. I remember not crying, just staring at the two broken halves, trying to imagine how glue could make something fly again. Back then, I thought cruelty was another form of education. It took me years to realize it was simply inherited fear, passed down like a family tool. My father's whole world existed in torque measurements and faith in bolts. My world began the moment bolts ran out. He never understood that difference. When I was 17, I left for Annapolis. He didn't come to the send-off. My mother handed me a note folded into quarters, his handwriting tight as wire. "Don't crash the family name." I folded it back and kept it in the lining of my flight jacket until the letters wore faint against the fabric. A warning can sound like love if you grow up around silence long enough. At the academy, I learned to survive by precision. Every checklist became scripture, every mistake a sin. My flight instructor, Captain Meyer, once said, "You treat flying like confession." He wasn't wrong. Every takeoff was a prayer I said under my breath. Every landing was proof that I still deserved the sky. When I earned my wings, I didn't invite my parents. The ceremony was brief, sunlight hard and white on the tarmac. I remember pinning the insignia through the fabric myself because I didn't want anyone else's hand shaking when it touched me. The metal was hot from the sun, and I could feel it burn through the fabric. Small pain, but honest. Afterward, in the quiet of my quarters, I took the note from my father and burned it over a tin mug. The paper curled like something trying to lift off but couldn't. That was the night I promised myself. My worth would never be argued at a dinner table again. Years later, in Kandahar, the wind never stopped moving. It hissed through the hangar at night like something alive. I used to stand at the edge of the runway and watch the shadows of rotors stretch long across the sand. The air always smelled like dust and JP8 fuel, a mix you can taste for the rest of your life. That was where I met Alvarez. He was a quiet man, skin always sun-browned, eyes too old for his face. He spoke rarely but precisely, like each word had to pass inspection before leaving his mouth. One night, we were running diagnostics on the Blackhawk, and he said, "You ever name your storms?" I looked up from the console. "Storms? The ones in your head." "Only the ones that survive," I said. He smiled, that half smile of someone who'd heard too many engines die mid-air. We flew hundreds of hours together, some textbook, some classified. He never asked about my past, and I never asked about his. Trust in the cockpit isn't a matter of biography, it's gravity. The only thing we talked about was flight itself. Lift, drag, faith. When I told him the truth about my father once, under a flickering maintenance light, he said, "Then make the sky your witness." That line stayed with me longer than any mission order. When the Helmand Ridge extraction came, the weather report called it non-navigable. Cole's team had been ambushed on the slopes, 3 miles from the evac point. Communication died with the second lightning strike. Command wrote them off before the rain even stopped. But Alvarez and I didn't. The wind was screaming when we lifted. You could smell ozone and burning insulation inside the cockpit. My fingers were slick inside the gloves. The night looked like it had swallowed its own stars. Halfway through the ridge corridor, a downdraft slammed us hard enough that the harness cut into my shoulder. The pain steadied me. When I spotted the first strobe through the rain, it was like seeing a heartbeat in the dark. We hovered, blades biting into the air, and I could see shapes moving, men soaked, dragging each other through mud. One of them fell. I dropped the bird lower, low enough that the rotor wash flattened the rain around them. They looked up into the belly light, faces white with disbelief. That's when the storm's edge caught us. The controls kicked. The machine fought back. I remember hearing my own breathing in the headset, fast and ugly. Alvarez shouted bearings, and I realized then that fear and faith sound identical through static. We made it out with the fuel gauge kissing empty. The ridge vanished behind us like it had never existed. 6 lives were breathing in the back. One whispered, "Who the hell are you?" I didn't answer. The debrief was short and classified. The name Reaper Zero came from Alvarez's report. He said we harvested death before it could take them. I hated the poetry of it, but Command loved it. After that, the story wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to Files and Whispers. I kept my silence. Cole, they said, lost men in a storm just like it years before. He blamed a pilot who'd turned back too soon. Maybe that's why he looked at me and saw the ghost of his own failure. Months later, when his first public slight came, a comment about my princess seat, I didn't flinch. The sting had calcified into something steadier. I remembered Miller's voice. Respect isn't granted. It's taken when they realize they're small. I began to collect every word, every half smile, every dismissive wave of his hand. I filed them away like mission reports. I wasn't hunting vengeance, I was preparing evidence. Silence is a weapon if you know how to aim it. By the time the Norfolk briefing came, my decision was already made. I wasn't going to defend myself anymore. I was going to let truth do what it does best: arrive without apology. That night, before the meeting, I cleaned my helmet for the 100th time. The microfiber cloth whispered against the visor. Under the old tape, the Reaper Zero engraving caught the light again. The wings looked ready. I pressed my thumb against the metal until I felt its heat, until the pain turned familiar. The hangar was quiet except for the ticking of cooling metal. Outside, the wind moved through the open doors and carried the smell of rain. It was the same smell as Hellman Ridge. And I thought of Alvarez, of that narrow corridor through the storm, and the one sentence that had followed me ever since: make the sky your witness. The next morning, I did, and that's how the storm found its way into the room. When the Admiral mocked me again, I didn't just answer him. I held up the mirror he'd spent years avoiding. The morning after that storm of silence, the base cafeteria buzzed like a hive. Metal trays, boots, gossip. The kind of low, constant hum that makes truth sound louder by contrast. I walked through it with my flight helmet under one arm. The air smelled of coffee burnt too long on the warmer and something fried in oil that hadn't been changed in weeks. They didn't whisper when I passed, they just stopped talking. That's how you know a reputation has changed shape. Silence becomes the new salute. Someone had leaked the Norfolk briefing to the rumor mill before sunrise. A few words were all it took. Reaper Zero's real. Every pilot knows how fast stories fly when they don't need a runway. I sat across from Alvarez. He was stirring oatmeal with the casual patience of a man who'd seen the world end twice before breakfast. You made the news, he said without looking up. I made an introduction, I said. He smiled into his bowl. You didn't even raise your voice. Didn't need to. Noise was his weapon. And now it's gone. Now it's quiet. He nodded. That's worse. It was. Silence isn't peace. It's accountability waiting to hatch. By noon, Cole hadn't called. That meant he was waiting, calculating. Men like him don't apologize, they reframe. I'd seen it before. He'd find a way to make my revelation sound like a misunderstanding or a breach of decorum. So I decided to leave nothing to interpretation. That afternoon, I compiled every after-action report, every flight log, every commendation. Each line of ink carried a date, a signature, and the same quiet truth: competence documented. I built a folder thick enough to need a binder clip, the weight of proof. It wasn't vengeance, it was oxygen for when the old air turned toxic. Chief Warrant Officer Miller found me in the hangar, bent over the paperwork. You planning to file a war, he said, voice half gravel, half humor. Just the record, I said. He leaned on the table, eyes tracking the columns of flight hours. You don't need to prove anything, kid. Not to him, not anymore. I'm not proving, I said, sliding the final page into the folder. I'm preserving. He grunted. That's heavier. He was right. He was. Preservation carries memory, and memory can be a weapon sharper than pride. The hangar light flickered. Dust motes drifted through it like slow, lazy snow. Outside, the wind pushed against the doors, making them groan in rhythm. Respect, Miller said finally, isn't granted. It's taken when they realize they're small. Then I'll let him see his size, I said. Miller smiled. Atta girl. That night, I returned to my quarters. The Reaper helmet sat on the desk under the dull glow of a single lamp. Its visor reflected me in fragments: chin, eyes, scar. The scratches made the reflection honest. I ran a cloth over it again, slow and deliberate. The faint smell of cleaner mixed with the familiar tang of aviation oil. I thought of my father's words: pilots are dreamers. Maybe, but even dreamers need altitude to breathe. On the wall above my bunk hung the framed commendation for Helmand Ridge. No one outside the right clearance level had ever seen it. I'd left it unsigned, intentionally, a blank line waiting for recognition that never came. Now I looked at it and realized it didn't need anyone else's ink. That realization, that quiet shift inside me, was the true catalyst. Not the briefing, not the laughter, the decision that I would no longer seek permission to exist in the air I'd already earned. The next week passed in controlled stillness. Cole avoided me in meetings, his gaze skimming past like a ship refusing to signal. But silence from a superior officer is its own confession. Command sent me to evaluate new pilots. I flew daily, touch-and-go drills, night runs, dust landings. I lived where I was strongest, inside the rhythm of rotor blades and trust. The thrum became a mantra again, washing out everything else. Then came the invitation. A new joint training exercise. SEAL Aviation Integration. Hosted by, of course, Admiral Nathan Cole. The notice bore his signature like a challenge dressed as protocol. Mandatory attendance, Norfolk. Same briefing hall, 2 weeks. I read the memo twice, folded it neatly, and tucked it into my flight log. My thumb left a faint smudge of oil on the margin. He wanted control back. He'd get clarity instead. 2 days before the event, I called my father. The number still sat in my phone under Chief Reynolds. Never Dad. It rang longer than I expected. "Who's this?" His voice hadn't changed. Same measured authority. Same edge of disbelief. "It's Ava." A pause. "Well, that's a surprise. I thought you should know I'm presenting at a SEAL aviation seminar. Norfolk." A low whistle. "They finally let pilots play with the real boys?" I almost smiled. "You'd like this one, Dad. It's about rescue operations." "Rescue, huh? Hope they teach you not to get lost first." Old habits die like old engines, slow and noisy. "I'm the instructor," I said. The silence that followed was thick, the kind that carries more confession than apology. "Well," he said at last, "guess you learned a few things after all." "I did," I said. "Mostly how to fly straight when the wind's wrong." He exhaled through his nose, an old sailor's answer to pride. "Good luck, kid." "I won't need it," I said and hung up. The night before the briefing, I stood in the hangar again. Rain beat the roof in steady percussion. Each drop sounded like a countdown. Alvarez joined me carrying 2 coffees that smelled like burnt courage. "You ready for tomorrow?" he asked. "Ready's not the word," I said. "It's just time." He nodded. "Cole doesn't know how much that helmet means to you, does he?" "He thinks it's just gear." "And what is it really?" I looked at the scratches, the tape, the little re-engraved wings. Proof of what silence costs and what it's worth. He raised his cup. "To storms, then." I lifted mine. "And to witnesses." We drank in the echo of rain. The hangar lights buzzed. A gust pushed through the door and carried the smell of wet asphalt and salt from the bay. For a heartbeat, the sound matched the rhythm of rotor blades. My fingers twitched reflexively, missing the cyclic. The urge to fly, to rise, to look down and see everything small enough to forgive. Tomorrow, I wouldn't need altitude. The reckoning would happen on the ground. That night, I opened the folder one last time. The paper edges were curled, smelling faintly of ink and glue. I slipped a single photo inside. The Helmand extraction team standing in the rain, all 7 faces blurred by low light. At the bottom, I wrote 3 words. They made it. Then I closed it, locked it in my briefcase, and set my alarm for a 500. Sleep came in pieces. Rotor sounds, lightning flashes, the ghost hum of the projector. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of the ridge again. The storm split open, and inside the wind, I heard my father's voice, this time saying nothing at all. That was the sweetest sound of all. The day of the Norfolk exercise arrived, and the Admiral wanted control back. But the sky and the truth had already chosen sides. The Norfolk auditorium breathed like a single animal, air vents sighing, boots scuffing, papers rasping. The projector came alive with a chirp, and a bright rectangle burned onto the wall. The light hit dust in the air, turning it into slow, drifting snow. I stood at the side table with my briefcase, the leather cool against my palm. Inside, the folder waited. After action reports, signatures, the photo with 3 words. They made it. My helmet sat beside the case, visor reflecting the blue of the idle screen. The re-engraved wings hid under the tape like a secret keeping its own heartbeat. On deck, the petty officer called, voice clipped and metallic through the PA. Chairs groaned. 40 officers settled into the same raked rows, the same angles of attention. I could smell coffee and static, that faint, sour scent of warmed electronics. Admiral Nathan Cole strode to the lectern. His ribbons caught the light. His smile did not. He adjusted the mic with 2 fingers. "We're here to sharpen," he said. "No egos, no legends, just standards. 8 words or less. Cutting by habit." I watched his gaze skim past me, careful as a ship refusing to acknowledge a lighthouse. He clicked the remote. A title slide flashed. SEAL Aviation Integration, Weather Risk Extractions. The projector fan took on a low whir, like a drone waiting for orders. "First," he continued, "we correct myths. Heroics kill teams. Procedures save them." A few heads nodded. A few didn't. Miller sat halfway back, forearms folded, expression flat as an anvil. Alvarez took a seat near the aisle, hands on his knees, wedding band catching a sliver of light. Cole flipped to a schematic of ridgelines and wind patterns. He tapped the slope with the laser pointer. A red dot wobbled on the screen. "This corridor? Non-navigable," he said. "Turn back, always." A murmur rustled the room. The word always has a smell, burnt certainty. I recognized it from my father's shop. Cole cleared his throat. "We'll have a pilot's perspective later. For now, we're aligned, yes?" I could feel the room try to agree with him out of muscle memory. Authority is a strong wind. It pushes even when it's wrong. He moved to outcomes. Bulleted rules marched across the blue. Checklist primacy, abort thresholds, crew rest, all valid, all safe, all incomplete. When he finally gestured toward me, it was with the bland generosity of a man handing a microphone to a variable. "Lieutenant Commander Reynolds," he said. His voice tasted like tin. I lifted the briefcase. The metal latch gave a precise, satisfying click. Papers shifted. The smell of ink and binder glue rose like a small ghost. I carried the folder to the lectern and set it down, then placed my helmet on the table with a quiet thunk. "Good morning," I said. The mic warmed my words with a faint hum. "I'll speak to the seam between procedure and judgment." Cole smiled without teeth. "Stick to doctrine." "I will," I said. "And to weather." A dry chuckle from someone in the back. It died quickly. I advanced the slide to a topographic model of the Helmand Ridge. Lines nested inside lines, the contour intervals looked like fingerprints pressed into sand. "This corridor," I said, pointing with an open palm instead of a laser, "is navigable sometimes. You need a shelf wind at 24 knots or higher, a cloud base above 900 feet, and thermal variance between leeward and windward slopes of at least 2 degrees Celsius. There's a seam. It's narrow. It's real." I let the conditions hang there like numbers on a scale. No flourish, just wait. Cole leaned into the mic. "We don't fly on hope." "We don't," I said. "We fly on observation, training, and math. Hope rides in the back with fear. Neither touches the cyclic." A few smiles, quick and guilty. The projector fan deepened a pitch like it needed more air. I clicked to a slide labeled, "Case Study, Classified Extraction, Parameters Only." No names, no times, no dates. Just wind arrows, a fuel curve, a timing sequence, and the altitude profile of a bird threading a needle. "There are nights," I said, "when turning back kills. The risk is not flying. The discipline is knowing the difference." Cole's jaw flexed. He took the mic. And when the pilot is wrong, then procedure buries the dead with protocol, I said. And we update the procedure. A thin ripple moved across the room. Attention sharpening, spine straightening. Accountability smells like cold metal. You feel it in your teeth. I opened the folder. Paper edges ticked against my thumb. I held up a redacted commendation. Signatures blacked out, the commendation line visible. Some of you believe this legend belongs to no one, I said. That's correct. Classified work belongs to teams, but the math belongs to the community. I turned to the board and wrote 3 numbers with a dry erase marker. The squeak cut through the room. Crosswind, 28. Ceiling, 1,000. Variance, 3.2. The numbers looked like coordinates on a small map. I underlined them once. The smell of the marker hung sweet and solvent in the air. Under these conditions, and I said, the corridor opens. Silence gathered itself and sat closer. Cole stood very still. His right thumb rubbed his wedding ring once. He reached for the mic again. Procedure says no, he said. I sign those procedures. His voice had cooled. I could feel the temperature drop, the HVAC exhaling another indifferent breath from the ceiling. I respect procedures, I said. I live because of them. But procedures are scaffolds. We climb them to see the building. We don't mistake them for the building. Miller's chair creaked as he leaned forward. Alvarez folded his hands tighter. Tiny sounds, but they carried. The room had shifted from lecture to hearing. Cole glanced toward the back doors. He was measuring exits. Men measure when their narrative won't hold. He tapped the lectern. We aren't here for war stories, he said. We're here for the truth, I said. It came out without heat, as if the sentence had been waiting in the room before either of us arrived. He smiled again, thin as paper. And what truth is that? I slid the helmet closer, the visor catching the projector's light. I could feel the micro scratches under my fingers, the texture of use. I peeled my thumb along the old strip of tape, not lifting it yet, only finding the edge. The adhesive tugged at my skin with a small, stubborn bite. The kind that fits on one line, I said. I moved to the next slide. Abort criteria versus tactical windows. A table. Clean. Clinical. I walked the room through the numbers. Fuel margins, wind shifts, shelf durations. The technical made a bridge the human could walk across. Commanders respect bridges. Halfway down the table, a young lieutenant asked, and if the corridor collapses? It always does, I said. The question is, where are you when it happens? A few heads dipped reflexively, as if dodging a rotor blade they could hear only in memory. Cole's eyes found mine over the lectern. For the first time that day, he spoke softly. Who taught you this? Storms, I said. I let the answer sit until it cooled. He tried a different angle, turning toward the crowd. There's a theory the ghost pilot at Helmand got lucky. Luck shouldn't be doctrine. Luck isn't, I said. Patience is. Timing is. Judgment is. He stared at the helmet. He couldn't seem to stop. The visor reflected him in fragments. Brows, cheekbone, mouth. People don't enjoy seeing themselves in pieces. Miller raised a hand. Sir, doctrine also records exceptions to sharpen rules. Today looks like one. Cole ignored him. He gestured at my folder. And that scrapbook? Record, I said. For the community. He laughed once, a dry cough of sound. Sounds personal. Only to those who made it. The air changed. I felt it. Rooms can tip. This one did. A whisper near the wall. Helmand. Another near the aisle. Reaper. Words travel when they remember where they're going. Cole tightened his grip on the lectern. Let's not mythologize. Names distort. They clarify, I said. He tilted his head. Whose name, then? I put my hand on the helmet. The plastic felt warm, as if it had decided to keep its own counsel until I asked otherwise. The tape was loose under my thumb. Names serve, I said. They don't rule. I looked at the officers. We fly for people who will never learn ours. The projector fan ramped up again. a small machine offering its breath to the moment. Cole took one step closer, eyes on the helmet now, oh, like a diver drawn to a dark mouth in a reef. Tell us, Lieutenant Commander, he said. What's your call sign? He wanted a stage. He got a mirror. I reached up and turned off the mic. The click was loud as a rivet snapping home. My voice didn't need amplification. The only sound left was the HVAC's cool whisper and the faint rasp of someone's sleeve as they shifted. I peeled the tape back. It lifted slow, threads of old adhesive stretching like cobwebs. Light slid across the metal lip. I raised the helmet to chest height, wings catching the blue from the screen. Some wings tear, some never land. The room leaned in as if pulled by a common wire. I showed them the name that had already changed the weather, and I left him no place to stand. The blue light of the projector washed over my hands as I held the helmet higher. The wings glimmered faintly like something alive under frost. My pulse slowed until I could hear only the blood in my ears and the distant whir of the cooling fan. Every officer in that room had turned into a statue of attention. Cole's mouth opened, but the words stayed trapped behind his teeth. He stared at the engraving, two shallow lines of steel, burned in and patient. The same emblem that had once hung in the command tent at Helmand, under tarps whipped by wind. Reaper Zero, I said. The words didn't echo. They landed, heavy and final, like landing gear finding ground after a long flight. Someone exhaled audibly. Captain Reeves whispered, "That was you." His voice cracked on the U. I nodded once. The corridor wasn't luck. No one moved. The air changed weight. Even the projector hum seemed to pull back, deferential. Cole blinked, color draining from his skin as if the word had reached under it and turned off the lights. His hands dropped from the lectern. The laser pointer rolled away and hit the floor, a single sharp clatter that made everyone flinch. That extraction, he started, voice hoarse. That was you? Every inch of it, I said. You used my flight log to brief new pilots 3 years ago. Miller leaned forward. Alvarez didn't blink. The entire room was still. Cole swallowed hard. The microphone caught the dry click in his throat. You could have told someone. Classified, I said. Besides, you weren't listening. He stared at me like a man trying to read his own past. I saw it then, the guilt he carried under all that ceremony. The line between arrogance and shame is thinner than paper. It tears the same way. He stepped closer, slow, unsure. The pilot that night saved 6 of my men. 7, I corrected. The 7th stopped breathing on the ridge but made it back after resuscitation. He nodded faintly, eyes shining with a mix of awe and disbelief. The room was silent enough to hear the rain beginning to tick the windows. I used to tell that story, he said, to new recruits. Called the pilot a myth. You were half right, I said. Myth's just truth, waiting for a witness. A thin tremor ran through his jaw. His shoulders slumped. He wasn't a villain anymore, just a man stripped of his illusion of size. He looked around the room as if seeking an ally, but found only eyes fixed on me. The authority had shifted quietly and irrevocably. Command by silence, rare but absolute. He turned back to me. Why didn't you take the commendation? Because storms don't hand out medals, I said. They just test who deserves to leave them. He winced. Then after a beat, I took my failures out on you. I could have answered with anger, could have drawn blood with a line sharp enough to scar. Instead, I spoke the truth that had carried me through 1,000 miles of weather and doubt. You didn't humiliate me, Admiral, I said softly. You educated everyone else. No one breathed for a count of 3. The projector light flickered once and went dark. The fan wound down, a sigh leaving the machine. All that remained was the sound of the rain and the faint buzz of fluorescent tubes overhead. I stepped back from the lectern, helmet still in my hands. The silence wasn't empty. It was charged, reverent, like the pause between a command and a salute. Then it happened. 40 officers, one by one, stood. No clapping, no words. Just the sound of chairs scraping concrete and uniforms rustling. A collective silence. Not obedient, but honoring. Cole stayed seated a moment longer. His breathing was audible, uneven. Finally, he rose too. His right hand twitched at his side, wanting to salute but not knowing if he'd earned the right. He didn't have to. The silence was enough. I placed the helmet back on the table. Tape peeled away, wings bare to the room. The light from the overheads made them gleam like old steel, flawed, resilient, real. I turned off the mic, tucked the folder under my arm, and walked toward the exit. As I passed Miller, he whispered, "They'll remember this longer than any doctrine." "Good," I said. "Doctrine forgets fast." Outside, the hallway was cooler, the air thick with the smell of rain and polished brass. I exhaled once, slow, steady, and felt the weight of years ease off my chest. Behind me, the doors to the briefing room stayed open. The silence still hung inside like a flag that didn't need wind to prove it existed. In the lobby, Alvarez was waiting, his flight jacket hung open. His eyes said everything words couldn't. "You flew straight," he said. "Always do." He smiled. "He won't forget today." "He shouldn't," I said. "Storms teach better than manuals." He looked past me at the doors. "You think they understood?" "They did," I said, "even if they don't say it yet." The glass doors opened with a hiss. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. The tarmac gleamed under the base lights like wet graphite. I could smell jet fuel drifting in from the hangar line. Sharp, familiar, alive. I stepped out, the cool drops tapping my face, and thought of all the storms that had tried to erase me. They hadn't failed because I was unbreakable. They'd failed because I kept flying. Behind me, the rain turned heavier again, a curtain closing on the scene. I didn't look back. Somewhere inside that room, Cole was still standing, staring at the helmet. Maybe he was seeing for the first time what respect really looked like when it stopped needing permission. Respect doesn't arrive with applause. It lands when silence stands. A few weeks later, Cole requested a private meeting. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He offered truth. 2 weeks later, the base was quieter. The rain had stopped, but left everything smelling like wet steel and detergent. The hangar doors were open, letting in the pale morning light that made the aircraft skin shine like coins at the bottom of a fountain. Cole asked to see me. The message was formal, typed by his aide. "Private debrief requested, command office, 0900. No subject line, no tone, just an order pretending not to be an apology. I walked across the tarmac, helmet in hand, the air cold enough to sting the lungs. A maintenance crew was testing a rotor nearby, each blade slicing through air with the measured patience of men who'd learned not to flinch. The sound carried like a memory I couldn't shake. Cole's office overlooked the bay. When I stepped inside, he was already standing. No ribbons today, just the simple khaki of a man who wanted less armor. "Lieutenant Commander Reynolds," he said, voice lower than I'd ever heard it. "Admiral," he gestured to the chair. He gestured, "Please." I sat. The seat was firm, leather creaking faintly. Between us, his desk was bare except for a single manila envelope and a mug that had gone cold. "I should start with this," he said. "You deserved better." I didn't speak. Silence, I'd learned, was the truest answer. It forces others to fill the space they created. He went on. "That day at Norfolk, I saw myself up there. Not you. My arrogance wasn't about you being a woman or a pilot or any of that. It was about me trying to erase my own failure." I watched the light from the window catch the lines on his face. For the first time, he looked human, not carved from authority. "The team you saved," he said. "That was mine. I lost their brothers years before. Same ridge, same storm type. We turned back too late." He swallowed hard. "I've been angry ever since. At weather, at pilots, at God. You just happened to walk into the line of fire." I leaned forward, resting my hands on my helmet. "Anger's easy. Respect takes more time." He nodded slowly. "You've earned both." He pushed the envelope toward me. Inside was a memo, transfer orders signed and sealed. Fleet Command, Strategic Operations Liaison. A promotion. Clean, official, undeniable. "I didn't request this," when I said, "I know," he replied. "I did. Consider it. Overdue maintenance." I slid the envelope back across the desk. "Then keep it. I'll earn it again somewhere else." He looked at me, confused, maybe impressed. You don't want the credit? I already took it, I said. In the silence, you didn't understand. He sat back, exhaled through his nose, and smiled. Small, tired, genuine. You make it hard to outrank you. I stopped trying to climb, I said. Now I just fly level. The room went still again. He extended his hand. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then I took it. His grip was steady, not commanding, not condescending, just steady. A man reaching finally for equal ground. As I stood to leave, he said quietly, You should know, your father called me. I froze. My father? He saw the footage from the seminar. Didn't know cameras were rolling. He asked for your contact. I didn't turn around. What did he say? Cole hesitated. He said, Tell her she flies straighter than I ever did. The sentence hit like altitude shift. Sudden, pressurized, disorienting. I kept my back to him, jaw locked, eyes on the light reflecting off the bay. Thank you, Admiral. He nodded. And, Commander, Reaper Zero suits you. I left before the air could grow heavy again. Outside, the wind had picked up just enough to lift the ends of my hair. The sound of the blades from the nearby test run folded into the wind, rhythmic and low. Alvarez was waiting near the hangar, sleeves rolled, hands stuffed into his pockets. How'd it go? He asked. Cleaner than expected, I said. Promotion? Paper says so. And you? I don't fly for paper. He smiled. Didn't think you did. We watched the bird lift from the pad, the downdraft scattering puddles into circles that rippled and vanished. The smell of fuel mixed with the salt air from the bay. It reminded me of Helmand, of the storm, of every moment I thought the world might end, and instead it taught me how to endure. Alvarez squinted into the light. You ever going to tell your old man? He already knows, I said. He nodded, understanding. Guess that storm finally cleared. Storms don't clear, I said. They just move somewhere else. We stood there until the helicopter became a dot against the horizon, a speck caught between water and sky. I thought of all the years that had led to this stillness. Every insult, every doubt, every quiet redemption no one saw. And I realized peace doesn't come when people stop doubting you. It comes when you stop needing their doubt to prove yourself. I tightened my grip on the helmet, feeling the rough edge where the tape had been. It wasn't perfect anymore. Neither was I. That was the point. As I walked back toward the barracks, the base intercom crackled alive with the faint, distant sound of a bugle. A shift change. New pilots taking off somewhere across the field. The notes hung in the air, bright and brief, before fading into the hum of engines. I stopped and looked up. The sky was clear, a thin band of clouds stretching like a scar across the blue. Beautiful in its imperfection. That was when I thought of him. My father, standing in some small Virginia living room, TV light flickering across his face, pride and regret finally sharing space. Maybe he was holding the phone, maybe not. Either way, I didn't need to hear it again. The wind touched my cheek, soft and salt-sweet, the kind that carries both memory and promise. And for the first time in years, I smiled without armor. Respect doesn't arrive with applause. It lands when silence stands. If you've ever been silenced, doubted, or underestimated, let this story remind you, storms end, truth doesn't. Subscribe for more true-style dramas of dignity, redemption, and quiet strength. Share this with someone who's earned respect the hard way or in storms, not speeches.